When a CEO's daughter collapses at a billion-dollar gala, only the janitor knows what to do. Tonight, you'll witness the moment when power, wealth, and reputation crumble in the face of something money can't fix, and how one invisible man changed everything. This is a story about the spaces between control and connection, about seeing what others refuse to acknowledge, and about the courage it takes to step forward when the entire world is watching you fail. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The Rosewood Grand Ballroom didn't just host events, it devoured them. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from vaulted ceilings, throwing fractured light across marble floors polished to a mirror finish. Every surface gleamed, every corner whispered money, the kind of money that didn't ask questions, didn't wait for answers, and certainly didn't apologize. Victoria Hale stood near the eastern wall, champagne flute untouched in her hand, watching the crowd with the same analytical precision she brought to quarterly earnings reports. Her black Armani gown fit like a second skin, elegant, severe, perfectly controlled, just like everything else in her life was supposed to be. Spectacular turnout, Victoria. Marcus Chen appeared at her elbow, his smile too wide, too practiced. Senior partner at Chen & Associates. Portfolio worth 8 figures, ego worth considerably more. You've really outdone yourself this year. The foundation does important work, Victoria said, her voice carrying the flat professionalism of someone who'd given this answer 24 times already tonight. Childhood literacy programs don't fund themselves. Marcus laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. Always the humanitarian. Though I have to say, bringing Lena tonight, bold choice. Victoria's fingers tightened around the champagne flute. My daughter has every right to be here. Of course, of course. Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender. Just saying, these events can be, overwhelming, especially for children with special needs. She's 8 years old, Marcus, not fragile. Naturally. His eyes drifted across the room, already calculating his next conversation, his next connection. Well, I should make the rounds. Investors to schmooze, you know how it is. Victoria watched him disappear into the crowd, her jaw tight. Special needs. The phrase sat in her mouth like copper, as if Lena was a problem to be managed, a deficit to be overcome, rather than a child who experienced the world differently. She'd heard it 1,000 times from teachers, therapists, well-meaning relatives who spoke in hushed tones about getting her the help she needs. She scanned the ballroom, searching for the small figure in the navy dress she'd picked out 3 weeks ago. Found her finally, standing near the dessert table with Victoria's assistant, Patricia. Even from across the room, Victoria could see the tension in Lena's shoulders, the way her hands twisted together at her waist. The band shifted into something louder, big band jazz, all brass and percussion. The sound rolled across the ballroom like thunder. Lena flinched. Victoria started moving, weaving through clusters of donors and board members, her heels clicking against marble. She was 10 feet away when she saw Lena's hands fly up to cover her ears, her small body going rigid. Lena, sweetheart. But Lena wasn't hearing her. The girl's eyes had gone wide and unfocused, her breathing rapid and shallow. Patricia knelt beside her, one hand hovering uncertainly near Lena's shoulder. Mrs. Hale, I think she might need... I've got her. Victoria crouched down, fighting against the tight constraint of her dress. Lena, honey, look at me. Can you look at me? Lena's gaze slid past her mother's face, tracking something invisible in the middle distance. Her hands pressed harder against her ears, fingers white with pressure. The music swelled, trumpets screaming, drums pounding. A woman nearby laughed, high and sharp, and Lena jerked like she'd been struck. Lena! Victoria reached out, tried to take her daughter's hand. Lena pulled away, stumbling backward into the dessert table. A tower of petite fours wobbled. Several tumbled to the floor in an explosion of pink frosting and gold leaf. Conversations died in concentric circles. Heads turned. Phones came out. Victoria's throat went tight. She could feel the weight of every eye in the room, could practically hear the whispers starting. There's Victoria Hale's daughter, the autistic one. Poor thing. Must be so difficult. Sweetheart, please. She kept her voice low, controlled. We can go somewhere quiet. Would you like that? Somewhere quiet? Lena's only response was a low, keening sound, barely audible under the music. Her whole body trembled. Victoria looked around, desperate. Patricia stood frozen, wringing her hands. The band played on, oblivious. A waiter approached with a cloth to clean up the fallen desserts, then thought better of it and retreated. "Mrs. Hale?" A new voice, professional and clipped. Victoria glanced up to find Robert, head of venue security, his expression carefully neutral. "Is there anything we can do to assist?" "We're fine," Victoria said automatically. "Just give us a moment." "Of course, ma'am. But if the young lady needs medical attention—" "She doesn't need medical attention. She needs—" Victoria stopped, the words catching. What did Lena need? What was she supposed to do when everything she'd learned, every strategy the therapist had taught her, evaporated under the pressure of 400 watching faces? Lena dropped to the floor, curling into herself, hands still clamped over her ears. The keening grew louder. Victoria felt something crack inside her chest. She reached for Lena again, tried to pull her daughter into an embrace. Lena twisted away, her small body surprisingly strong in its panic. "Don't touch her." The voice came from behind Victoria, quiet but firm. She turned, ready to snap at whoever dared to interfere, and found herself looking at a man in a gray maintenance uniform. Late 30s, maybe early 40s. Dark hair starting to silver at the temples. He held a mop in one hand, a yellow caution sign in the other. "Excuse me?" Victoria's voice could have frozen nitrogen. The man set down his equipment, moving with unhurried precision. "She's in sensory overload. Touching her right now will make it worse. I know what my daughter needs." "With respect, ma'am, I don't think you do." He didn't look at Victoria. His attention stayed fixed on Lena, his body language open but not approaching. "Not right now, anyway." "Security," Victoria started, but Robert had already stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back." The janitor ignored him. He lowered himself to the floor in one smooth motion, sitting cross-legged about 6 feet from where Lena huddled. The distance seemed deliberate, calculated. "Hey there," he said, pitching his voice barely above a whisper. "My name's Ethan. I'm not going to touch you or talk loud or come any closer. I'm just going to sit right here, okay?" Lena's keening stuttered, stopped. Her hand stayed clamped over her ears, but her eyes, dark and wide and terrified, tracked to the stranger on the floor. Ethan began to rock, a gentle forward and back motion, steady as a metronome. His hands rested on his knees, fingers tapping out a rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Simple, predictable. "The music's real loud, isn't it?" he said softly. "And the lights are probably doing that thing where they flicker just a little bit, too fast for most people to see, but you notice every single one. Am I right?" Lena's rocking slowed, beginning to sync with his. Victoria opened her mouth, but Patricia caught her arm, shaking her head fractionally. Around them, the crowd had grown silent. Even the band had trailed off, the conductor staring at the scene unfolding on his ballroom floor. "I bet the floor feels cold too," Ethan continued, still rocking, still tapping. "Even through your tights, and there's probably a smell, something sweet and chemical, like air freshener mixed with floor wax. Makes your nose itch." Lena's hands lowered an inch, just an inch. "You're doing great," Ethan said. "Really great. I know everything feels like too much right now. Like the whole world is pressing in from every direction, but you're still here, still breathing. That takes real strength." His rocking continued, patient and unchanging. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. His fingers maintained their rhythm on his knees. Tap, tap, tap. Slowly, so slowly Victoria almost missed it, Lena's hands came down from her ears. They hovered at shoulder height, trembling, ready to clamp back down at the first loud sound. But they were down. "That's it," Ethan murmured. "You're in control. You get to decide what happens next. Nobody's going to rush you or push you or make you do anything you're not ready for." Victoria felt her eyes burning. She blinked hard, forcing the tears back. Around her, the ballroom held its collective breath. 400 people frozen, watching a janitor in a gray uniform do what she, with all her resources and determination, could not. Lena's breathing began to even out. The rigid tension in her shoulders eased by fractions. "If you want," Ethan said, "you can try matching my breathing. You don't have to, but if you want to, just watch. He drew a slow breath. And out. Released it. In. and out. That's all there is to it. In and out, just like the ocean. Lena watched him. Then, tentatively, she exhaled. Perfect, Ethan said. Absolutely perfect. You've got this. They sat like that for what felt like hours, but couldn't have been more than 2 minutes. Rocking, breathing, existing in a pocket of calm while chaos pressed in from every side. Then Lena did something that made Victoria's heart stop. She extended her hand. Palm up, fingers spread, reaching across the space between her and this stranger who'd somehow understood what no one else could see. Ethan looked at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, with exquisite care, he placed his palm against hers. Not gripping, not pulling, just touching, palm to palm, letting her control the pressure and duration. "Thank you for trusting me," he said quietly. Lena's lips moved. The words came out barely louder than breath. Too loud. "I know. Want to go somewhere quieter?" A nod. Ethan stood, keeping his movement slow and telegraphed. He offered his hand again, an invitation, not a demand. Lena took it, letting him help her to her feet. That's when Victoria's brain finally kicked back into gear. "Wait, you can't just... Where are you taking her?" Ethan glanced at her, his expression patient. "Wherever she needs to go. Probably somewhere with less light, less noise. Maybe that hallway near the kitchen that nobody's using." He paused. "You can come too, if you want. But you'll need to stay quiet. And don't try to hug her or fix anything. Just be there." It should have sounded patronizing, condescending. Instead, it just sounded tired, like a man who'd explained this too many times to people who didn't want to listen. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice. Security parted as Ethan led Lena through the crowd, her small hand still tucked in his. Victoria followed 3 steps behind, hyper-aware of every whisper, every pointing finger, every phone still recording this disaster. Marcus Chen watched them pass, his expression hovering somewhere between concern and calculation. "Victoria, if you need to handle this, I'm handling it," she said, her voice flat and final. They passed through the main ballroom into the service corridor beyond. The noise dropped immediately, the heavy fire doors cutting the music to a muffled thump. The lighting here was different too, plain fluorescents instead of crystal chandeliers, harsh but steady. No flickering. Lena's shoulders dropped another inch. Ethan found a spot where the corridor widened into a small alcove, currently empty except for a folding table and some stacked chairs. He released Lena's hand, stepping back to give her space. "Better?" he asked. Lena nodded, then surprised Victoria by sitting down right there on the floor, her back against the wall. She drew her knees up to her chest, wrapping her arms around them. Ethan sat too, maintaining that careful distance. Not too close, not too far. Victoria stood awkwardly, still in her evening gown and heels, feeling utterly out of place in this utilitarian corridor. She'd conquered boardrooms, stared down hostile investors, negotiated deals worth millions. But right now, watching her daughter breathe in steady rhythm with a janitor she'd never met, she felt completely lost. "I'm sorry," Lena whispered. "Hey." Ethan's voice stayed soft. "Nothing to be sorry for. Sometimes things get overwhelming. Happens to everybody." "Mom's mad." Victoria's throat constricted. "I'm not mad, sweetheart." Lena didn't look at her. "You did the face, the tight face." "That's just..." Victoria stopped. Started again. "I was worried, not mad. Never mad at you." Everyone was looking. "Yeah," Ethan said. "They were. And you know what? They can keep looking. Doesn't change anything about who you are or what you needed." Lena's fingers found the hem of her dress, twisting the fabric. A stim, the therapist called it. Self-regulation through repetitive movement. Victoria had spent 2 years trying to break the habit before finally, grudgingly, accepting that maybe Lena needed it more than she needed to look normal. "My son does that too," Ethan said, nodding toward Lena's hands. "Likes the texture. Says it helps him think." Lena's head came up slightly. "You have a son?" "Yeah, Micah. He's 10. Loves dinosaurs and prime numbers and Star Wars in that order." Ethan smiled, the expression transforming his face. "Gets overwhelmed at school sometimes. Too many voices, too many rules that don't make sense. Sound familiar?" "The cafeteria is the worst," Lena said, her voice still small but stronger. Everyone talks at once, and the trays make that crashing sound, and the smell of the hot lunch makes my stomach hurt. Micah takes his lunch outside when it gets like that. His principal finally agreed to let him eat in the library on really bad days. Ethan stretched his legs out, crossing them at the ankle. Took me 3 meetings and a letter from his therapist, but we got there. Victoria felt something twist in her chest. How many times had she fought similar battles, and how many times had she approached them as problems to be solved, rather than accommodations to be understood? Mrs. Hale? Patricia appeared at the end of the corridor, her face anxious. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but the investors are asking. They want to know if everything is all right, and Mr. Chen suggested maybe postponing your speech until, tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. Victoria's voice could have cut steel. But if Lena needs 5 minutes, Patricia. The assistant retreated, already pulling out her phone. Victoria looked down at her daughter, still curled against the wall, and felt the familiar war between what she wanted to do and what she needed to do. Lena was clearly calmer, but still fragile, still raw. The smart thing, the careful thing, would be to stay here. Skip the speech, let Marcus or someone else handle the donors. But she'd worked for 6 months on this gala. 6 months of planning and negotiating and calling in favors. The foundation's entire next year of funding depended on tonight's pledges. If she disappeared now, if she let this incident derail everything... I have to go back out there, Victoria said, the words tasting like ash. Just for a little while. Patricia can stay with you, or I'll stay with her, Ethan said quietly. If that's okay with Lena. Lena nodded, not looking up. Victoria wanted to argue. This was a stranger, a man she knew nothing about except that he pushed a mop and somehow understood her daughter better than she did. Every maternal instinct screamed at her to object, but Lena was calm, safe, and Victoria was out of time. 30 minutes, she said. I'll be back in 30 minutes. She didn't wait for a response. Couldn't. If she stayed another second, she'd crumble. And Victoria Hale did not crumble. Not in public. Not where people could see. The walk back to the ballroom felt endless. Her heels clicked against tile, each step an accusation. The heavy doors loomed ahead, and beyond them, the murmur of 400 voices picking apart what they'd just witnessed. She pushed through. The crowd noise didn't quite die when she entered, but it shifted, became watchful, waiting. Marcus materialized at her elbow again, his expression carefully concerned. Victoria, how is she? Fine, she's fine. Victoria accepted a fresh champagne flute from a passing waiter, didn't drink it. Just needed some quiet. Of course, these events can be taxing for anyone, let alone a child with her challenges. He lowered his voice. Though I have to say, the optics of leaving her with the janitorial staff. His name is Ethan, Victoria said, her voice diamond hard. And he did more for my daughter in 5 minutes than most trained professionals have managed in years. Marcus blinked, clearly recalculating. I meant no offense, simply that potential investors might question your judgment, and if they question my judgment based on who I trust with my daughter's well-being, then they're not investors I want. Victoria drained half the champagne in one swallow, felt it burn. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a speech to give. She didn't wait for his response. The stage beckoned from the far end of the ballroom, draped in foundation banners and backlit for maximum impact. Her notes waited there, carefully crafted talking points about literacy rates and community investment and the power of education to transform lives. It all felt hollow now. Victoria climbed the stairs to the stage, her heels steady despite the champagne fizzing through her veins. The podium gleamed under the lights. She gripped its edges, looking out at a sea of faces, wealthy faces, powerful faces, faces that had just watched her fail. Good evening, she began, her voice steady through sheer force of will. Thank you all for being here tonight. Your continued support of the Hale Foundation for Childhood Literacy means more than you can possibly know. The words flowed automatically. She'd practiced this speech 50 times, refined every pause and emphasis. But beneath the polished delivery, her mind kept drifting back to that corridor. To Lena curled on the floor, to Ethan's quiet competence, his unhurried calm, to the way her daughter had reached out and taken his hand. Which is why we're expanding our program to 15 new schools next year, Victoria continued, hitting her marks, finding her rhythm. Early intervention is critical. The skills these children develop now will serve them for life. Polite applause. She acknowledged it with a practiced smile, moved to her next point, but the words felt increasingly empty. Early intervention, skill development, all the corporate language she used to describe helping children, as if they were projects to be managed rather than people to be understood. The irony wasn't lost on her. 20 minutes. She could see the golden clock on the far wall, its hands crawling toward the moment when she could escape. Just 20 more minutes of smiling and thanking donors and pretending tonight hadn't been a complete disaster. A hand went up in the crowd. Stuart Morrison, venture capital titan and notoriously difficult donor. Victoria's stomach sank. Yes, Mr. Morrison? Miss Hale, I couldn't help but notice the earlier incident with your daughter. His voice carried across the ballroom, designed to be heard. I wonder if you might address concerns about your ability to manage both the foundation's expansion and your personal challenges. The room went silent. Victoria's fingers tightened on the podium, every eye fixed on her, waiting. Phones came up again, ready to catch whatever happened next. She could deflect, should deflect, turn the question into something safe, something media-trained and polished. Instead, she heard herself say, "My daughter is not a challenge, Mr. Morrison. She's a person who experiences the world differently than you or I do. And if tonight demonstrated anything, it's that perhaps we should all spend more time trying to understand rather than manage." Morrison's eyebrows rose. A touching sentiment, but surely you can see how potential partners might view what exactly? Victoria leaned into the microphone. The fact that my child had a sensory overload at a loud event, that she needed help and someone provided it? Or are you concerned because the person who helped her wasn't wearing a suit? Victoria, Marcus's voice, warning and low. She ignored him. Because I'll tell you what I learned tonight, Mr. Morrison. I learned that expertise doesn't always come with credentials, that sometimes the people we overlook, the ones we don't even see, understand things we've spent fortunes trying to figure out. That janitor you all watched with such curiosity, he taught me more about my own daughter in 5 minutes than I've learned in 8 years of expensive therapy. The silence had weight now, substance. Morrison's expression had gone carefully blank. I see. Well, I'm sure we all wish your daughter well. Though I do think, Mr. Morrison, a new voice, crisp and British. Victoria's eyes tracked to Eleanor Ashford, old money personified, seated at the center table with her trademark pearls and surgical precision. I believe what Ms. Hale is trying to articulate, perhaps inelegantly, is that we might all benefit from examining our assumptions about competence and worth. Morrison turned to face her. Eleanor, I'm simply raising legitimate questions about, you're being a pompous ass, Stuart. Eleanor's smile never wavered. A child had a medical episode. A kind person helped. That's the story. Everything else is you being uncomfortable with the reminder that money doesn't solve all problems. She lifted her champagne. Now, sit down before you embarrass yourself further. A ripple of nervous laughter. Morrison's face flushed red, but he sat. Victoria found herself smiling, a real smile this time, not the careful public mask. Thank you, Mrs. Ashford. Don't thank me yet, dear. You still have 16 new schools to fund. Eleanor's eyes glinted. Though I suppose you can add my pledge to the total. Let's say $2 million for the year, provided you send me information about this janitor's son. My grandson has similar issues. Perhaps we could learn something. The room shifted. Phones went down. Other hands went up, donors suddenly eager to demonstrate their own progressive thinking. Victoria finished her speech in a daze, the pledges climbing higher than she'd dared hope. But the numbers felt distant, abstract. All she could think about was getting back to that corridor. To Lena. The moment her 30 minutes expired, she stepped down from the stage and walked straight toward the service entrance. No networking, no thank yous, no gracious mingling. Just a mother moving toward her child with the single-minded focus of someone who'd finally figured out what actually mattered. The corridor was exactly as she'd left it. Ethan still sat against the wall, though his position had shifted slightly. And Lena was showing him something on her hands, fingers moving in complex patterns. And then you do this part, and it makes a star, she was saying, her voice quiet but animated. That's amazing, Ethan said, his hands attempting to mirror her movements. I keep getting tangled at this part, though. Show me again? Lena demonstrated patiently, her face more relaxed than Victoria had seen it in weeks. Mom! She looked up as Victoria approached. Ethan's learning string games. He's not very good yet. Hey now, Ethan laughed. I'm learning. There's a difference. Victoria lowered herself to the floor, no longer caring about her dress. I can see that. Are you feeling better, sweetheart? Lena nodded. It's quiet here, and Ethan knows about the buzzing. The buzzing? The electrical buzzing in the walls, Ethan explained. Most people can't hear it, but Micah picks it up. Drives him crazy in some buildings. He glanced at Lena. I'm guessing you hear it too? All the time, Lena said, like bees. But Mom says there aren't any bees. Victoria felt that twist in her chest again. I didn't know you could hear that. I told you. You said I was imagining it. The words hit like a physical blow. How many times had she dismissed what Lena tried to explain? How many times had she assumed she knew better, understood better, saw more clearly? I'm sorry, Victoria said quietly. I should have listened. Lena shrugged, already moving on to the next string configuration. But Ethan caught Victoria's eye, gave a small nod that somehow felt like absolution. They sat there for a while longer, the three of them in their unlikely configuration. Eventually, Patricia appeared again, hesitant. Mrs. Hale? The event is winding down. Should I call your car? Victoria glanced at Lena. Ready to go home? Can Ethan come? Lena asked, then immediately ducked her head. Sorry, that's weird. Not weird, Ethan said, but I've got to finish my shift and your mom probably has other things to do. He stood, offered a hand to help Lena up. She took it without hesitation. But maybe we could meet up sometime. You could show Micah your string games. He'd love them. Lena's eyes lit up. Really? Really? He looked at Victoria. If that's okay with your mom. Victoria found herself nodding, even as part of her brain screamed about stranger danger and appropriate boundaries and all the rules she'd built her life around. I'd like that. Ethan pulled a worn business card from his pocket. Ethan Cole, Maintenance Services, followed by a phone number. Text me. We'll figure something out. The card felt significant in Victoria's hand, a bridge to something she didn't quite understand yet, but knew she needed to explore. They said their goodbyes and made their way to the parking garage. Lena was quiet, but calm in the elevator, her hand in Victoria's. The driver opened the town car door and they slid into the leather interior, the world outside going dark and quiet. Mom? Lena's voice was small in the darkness. Yes, sweetheart? Why does Ethan understand but other people don't? Victoria thought about how to answer that. I think maybe he's had practice with his son. He's learned to see things differently. You don't see things like he does. It wasn't an accusation, just an observation, but it cut deeper than any investor's criticism ever could. No, Victoria admitted, I don't, but I'm trying to learn. Lena was silent for a moment, then, it's okay if you don't understand everything. Ethan says his wife doesn't understand everything either, and that's normal. He's married? Victoria found herself unreasonably surprised by this information. She died. That's why he and Micah live alone now. Lena said it matter-of-factly, the way children reported information without grasping its weight. Car accident 2 years ago. Victoria's throat went tight. She thought about Ethan's patient calm, his easy understanding, and wondered what it had cost him, what he'd learned and lost. The car pulled up to their brownstone on the Upper East Side. Home. Safety. The nanny would be waiting inside, along with a glass of wine and the blessed quiet of Lena's bedtime routine. But as Victoria helped her daughter out of the car, she found herself thinking about that corridor, about sitting on a cold floor in a designer gown, watching a janitor teach her daughter string games, about the way Lena had reached out her hand without fear, about everything she thought she knew and how little it had actually mattered when it counted. Inside, the nanny took Lena upstairs for bath and bed. Victoria poured herself that wine, stood in her pristine kitchen with its granite counters and sub-zero appliances, and pulled out Ethan's business card. Her phone sat on the counter, silent and waiting. She should probably vet him properly. Run a background check. Make sure everything was appropriate and above board before allowing any further contact. That's what a responsible parent would do. Instead, she found herself typing, "This is Victoria Hale. Thank you for tonight. Lena would love to meet Micah. Let me know when works for you." She hit send before she could second guess it. The response came faster than she expected. "Thursday after school, there's a park near us that's usually quiet. Micah knows all the good spots." Victoria stared at the message. Thursday. 3 days away. She had a board meeting Thursday afternoon, a conference call with London that couldn't be moved, a dinner with potential partners. She typed, "Thursday works. Send me the address." Upstairs, she could hear Lena singing softly to herself in the bath. Some song from a show Victoria had never watched, words she didn't recognize. Her daughter's voice, small and sweet and completely her own. Victoria drained her wine, set the glass in the sink, and headed upstairs. Tomorrow she'd deal with the fallout from tonight. The gossip, the speculation, the careful damage control required to maintain her reputation in a world that judged every stumble. But tonight, she was just going to sit with her daughter and listen to her sing. And maybe, just maybe, try to hear what she'd been missing all along. Thursday came faster than Victoria expected, arriving with all the subtlety of a freight train. She'd spent the past 3 days fielding calls, some congratulatory about the fundraising numbers, others less kind about what the society pages were calling the incident. Her assistant had compiled a media brief that morning, 6 mentions in local business publications, 2 in lifestyle magazines, and 1 particularly vicious blog post questioning whether a woman who couldn't control her own child had any business running a major foundation. Victoria had deleted the email without reading past the first paragraph. Now she sat in her office, staring at the address Ethan had sent her. Riverside Park, near 103rd Street. Not exactly her neighborhood. The conference call with London had run long, and her board meeting had devolved into what Marcus Chen clearly thought was a productive discussion about optics and public perception, but what Victoria recognized as 20 minutes of well-dressed people debating whether her daughter's existence was bad for business. She'd left early, let them talk. Her driver pulled up to the park entrance at 4:15. Lena had been vibrating with barely contained energy since Victoria picked her up from school, talking non-stop about what games she'd show Micah, whether he liked the same dinosaurs she did, if he knew how to do the double-star string configuration she'd been practicing. "Remember," Victoria said as they got out of the car, "if it gets too overwhelming—" "I know, Mom. I can take a break. You've told me 5 times. Lena was already scanning the park, searching. "Do you see them?" Victoria didn't at first. The park was busier than she'd expected for a Thursday afternoon. Parents with strollers, joggers, a couple of teenagers throwing a frisbee. Then she spotted Ethan near a cluster of trees, sitting on a bench with a boy who had to be Micah. Dark hair like his father's, but lighter skin, suggesting his mother had been white. He wore headphones around his neck and held what looked like a battered notebook. "There," Victoria said, pointing. Lena took off before Victoria could say anything else, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Victoria followed more slowly, suddenly uncertain. What was the protocol here? This wasn't a business meeting. There was no agenda, no clear objective beyond 2 children playing in a park. She had no idea what she was doing. Ethan stood as they approached. He'd traded his maintenance uniform for jeans and a faded Columbia sweatshirt. Somehow he looked both more and less substantial, just a regular parent at a park. Nothing remarkable, except Victoria couldn't stop thinking about how those same hands had steadied her daughter when nothing else could. "You found us," he said, smiling. "Lena, this is Micah." "Micah, this is Lena I told you about." Micah glanced up from his notebook, gave a small wave, then immediately looked back down. "Hi." Lena stopped a few feet away, suddenly shy. "Hi, what are you drawing?" "Velociraptor." Micah tilted the notebook so she could see. The drawing was surprisingly detailed, all sharp angles and careful shading. "Did you know they were probably covered in feathers? Not like in the movies." "I read that." Lena's shyness evaporated. "And they were only about the size of a turkey, right? Not the giant ones in Jurassic Park." "Exactly." Micah's whole face lit up. "Most people don't know that. They just believe the movies." And just like that, they were off, talking over each other about theropods and fossil records and whether the Cretaceous period was actually cooler than the Jurassic. They drifted toward a nearby tree, Micah still clutching his notebook, Lena gesturing animatedly. Victoria and Ethan stood by the bench, suddenly alone. That was easier than I expected, Victoria said. Common interests help. Ethan sat back down, gestured for her to join him. Micah doesn't make friends easily. Too intense about his special interests, other kids think he's weird. But if you can talk dinosaurs or prime numbers, you're in. Victoria settled onto the bench, very aware of the space between them. Lena's the same. The other girls in her class want to talk about pop stars and fashion. She wants to explain the life cycle of sea turtles. Sounds like a better conversation to me. They fell into silence, watching the kids. It should have been awkward, sitting with a man she barely knew. But something about the park softened the edges, made it feel less like an obligation and more like, what? Not quite friendship, not yet. But maybe the beginning of something that could become that. I looked you up, Ethan said after a moment, after the gala. Hope that's not creepy. Victoria's stomach tightened. Find anything interesting? Lots of business stuff, awards. That profile in Forbes about women in philanthropy, you've done a lot of good work. But? No but. Just observing that none of those articles mentioned you had a daughter. He said it carefully, watching her reaction. A couple of them mentioned your late husband. Brain aneurysm, 3 years ago. I'm sorry. Victoria's throat went tight. David. She hadn't talked about David in months, maybe longer. It was easier to just not. To focus on work and Lena and all the ways she could stay too busy to think about the hole he'd left. Thank you, she managed. It was sudden. One day he was fine, the next... She stopped, couldn't finish. Sarah, my wife. We had 3 minutes. Ethan's voice was flat, factual, like he was reading from a police report. Drunk driver ran a red light. I was on the phone with her when it happened. Heard the impact, then nothing. Jesus. Victoria looked at him, really looked. Saw the lines around his eyes, the way he held himself slightly hunched, like he was protecting something fragile inside. I'm sorry doesn't begin to cover it. No, but we say it anyway, because what else is there? He watched Micah, who was now demonstrating something with his hands, while Lena nodded enthusiastically. He asks about her less now. I don't know if that's healing or just forgetting. Both feel awful. Victoria understood that. Lena barely remembered David. She'd been 5 when he died, and her memories were fragmentary at best. Sometimes Victoria wondered if she was relieved about that, then hated herself for the thought. How do you do it? She asked. Work and parenting and keeping it all together. Ethan laughed, the sound bitter. You think I have it together? I'm a janitor, Victoria. I work nights and weekends because that's when I can leave Micah with my sister. We live in a 1-bedroom in Washington Heights because that's what I can afford. Most days I'm running on 4 hours of sleep and determination. But you understood what Lena needed. You knew exactly, because I've failed so many times with Micah. He cut her off, not unkindly. You think that was expertise? That was scar tissue. That was every meltdown I've handled wrong. Every time I tried to force him to be normal instead of accepting who he is. I only look calm because I've already made every mistake there is to make. Victoria sat with that. Around them, the park continued its afternoon rhythm. The joggers jogged, the parents pushed strollers, the world turned, indifferent to their small struggles. I don't know what I'm doing, she admitted quietly. With Lena, with any of it. Everyone expects me to have answers, to be in control, but I just don't. And the harder I try, the worse it gets. Yeah. Ethan leaned back against the bench. That sounds about right. You're supposed to tell me it gets easier. Why would I lie to you? Despite everything, Victoria found herself smiling. Most people do. They say things like, you're doing great, or she's lucky to have you, or other meaningless platitudes. You want me to blow smoke? I can blow smoke. But I figured you for someone who'd rather have the truth. The truth is exhausting. The truth is we're both doing the best we can with impossible situations, and some days that's barely enough. And that's okay. He glanced at her. You love her, right? Lena? Of course I do. She's my daughter. Then you're already doing the most important thing. Everything else is just details. Before Victoria could respond, Lena came running over, Micah trailing behind. Mom! Micah knows all the periods of dinosaur evolution, and he says there might be a new exhibit at the Natural History Museum. And can we go? Please! Victoria looked at Ethan, who shrugged. I've been meaning to take him. Keeps asking. This Saturday? The words came out before Victoria could think them through. She had a luncheon Saturday, some foundation thing she'd committed to months ago. But looking at Lena's face, bright with excitement and hope, the luncheon suddenly seemed very unimportant. Works for us, Ethan said. Yes! Lena grabbed Micah's hand, pulling him back toward the tree. Did you know they have a real T-Rex skeleton? Well, it's a cast, but it's still really cool, and their voices faded as they returned to their previous spot, already deep in planning. You didn't have to do that, Ethan said. If you're busy, I'm always busy. That's the problem. Victoria pulled out her phone, fired off a quick text to Patricia canceling Saturday's luncheon. The response came back almost immediately. 3 exclamation points and a question mark. Victoria ignored it. Besides, when was the last time you took a Saturday off? Define off. Not working, not cleaning someone else's building, just existing. Ethan considered this. Can't remember. Sarah was always better at that stuff, making sure we had downtime, family time. Without her, he trailed off, looking at Micah. It's mostly just survival mode now. Victoria thought about her own calendar, color-coded and packed to the margins. Board meetings, donor dinners, conference calls, strategy sessions. When had she last done something just because it sounded nice? Because Lena wanted to, not because it served some larger purpose. We're a mess, she said. Spectacular mess, Ethan agreed. But hey, at least the kids are happy. They sat there for another hour, occasionally interrupted by Lena or Micah with urgent dinosaur facts or questions about evolution. The sun dropped lower, painting everything gold. Other families started to leave, the park slowly emptying. Finally, Ethan checked his watch. I've got to get Micah home. School night and all that. Right, of course. Victoria stood, brushed off her slacks. She'd come straight from the office, still in her business clothes, completely overdressed for a park playdate. Saturday then? 10 o'clock at the museum? We'll be there. Micah and Lena exchanged an elaborate handshake they'd apparently invented over the past hour, all finger-snapping and palm-slapping and synchronized movements. Then, to Victoria's surprise, Lena hugged him. Quick and awkward, but definitely a hug. Micah looked startled, but pleased. See you Saturday. See you. Victoria and Lena walked back to where the car waited. The driver opened the door, and they climbed into the familiar leather interior. As they pulled away, Victoria looked back to see Ethan and Micah heading in the opposite direction, toward the subway station. I like Micah, Lena announced. He doesn't think I'm weird. You're not weird, sweetheart. Mom? Yes, I am. It's okay. Micah's weird too. That's why we're friends. Victoria wanted to argue, to insist that Lena was perfectly normal, wonderfully normal, beautifully normal. But the words stuck in her throat, because maybe Lena was right. Maybe weird wasn't the problem everyone made it out to be. Well then, Victoria said carefully, I'm glad you found someone who gets it. Me too. Lena pulled out her string, started working through one of her configurations. Ethan's nice too. He doesn't do the voice. The voice? The one adults use when they're trying too hard, like they're scared of me or something. Lena's fingers moved through the string pattern with practiced ease. You do it sometimes. Victoria felt like she'd been slapped. I do? When you're worried, your voice goes all soft and careful, and you ask me a million questions about how I'm feeling. Lena glanced up. I know you're trying to help, but it makes it worse, kind of. Makes me think something's wrong with me. Nothing is wrong with you? Then why do you act like there is? The question hung between them for the rest of the drive home. Victoria had no answer. Or maybe she did, but it was one she didn't want to face. That night, after Lena was asleep, Victoria poured herself a scotch and sat in David's old study. She hadn't changed anything in here since he died. Same books on the shelves, same papers on the desk, same coffee mug he'd used every morning still sitting by the window. Her therapist said it was unhealthy, this preservation of space, that she needed to move forward, let go, make room for the future. But Victoria liked this room, liked feeling close to someone who'd never looked at her like she was failing. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Micah hasn't stopped talking about Lena. Thanks for today. She stared at it for a long moment, then saved the contact. Ethan Cole, a janitor from Washington Heights, who somehow understood her daughter better than anyone else. She typed back, Lena feels the same. See you Saturday. The response was immediate. Looking forward to it. Victoria set down her phone and sipped her scotch. Tomorrow she'd have to deal with the luncheon fallout, the questions about why she'd canceled, the carefully worded concerns about her priorities. Marcus had already left 2 voicemails about an urgent matter that almost certainly wasn't urgent at all. But tonight, she was just going to sit in her dead husband's study and think about dinosaurs and string games and the way Lena's face had lit up when Micah understood her reference to feathered velociraptors. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the kind of October day that promised winter was coming but hadn't committed yet. Victoria dressed casually, jeans, a sweater, comfortable shoes, the kind of outfit that felt foreign after years of power suits and designer dresses. Lena had been up since 6, too excited to sleep. She'd changed outfits 3 times before settling on her favorite dinosaur t-shirt and leggings. Now she bounced in the back seat of the car, unable to sit still. What if the exhibit is closed? What if they're doing renovations? What if... Then we'll find something else to look at, Victoria said. The museum is huge, plenty of other things to see. But the exhibit wasn't closed. They found Ethan and Micah waiting near the entrance, Micah wearing a backpack covered in NASA patches and holding a notebook identical to the one from the park. You made it, Ethan said, smiling. He looked different today, too. Less tired, maybe. Or maybe Victoria was just seeing him differently. Wouldn't miss it. Victoria paid for their tickets, waving off Ethan's attempt to contribute. My treat. Inside, the museum swallowed them in the best possible way. High ceilings, echoing halls, the particular smell of old buildings and preserved history. Micah led them straight to the dinosaur wing, Lena right beside him, both of them talking over each other in their excitement. Victoria and Ethan followed at a slower pace, letting the kids set the tempo. So, Ethan said as they walked, how bad was the fallout from canceling whatever you canceled? How did you know I canceled something? You had that look. The one people get when they're doing something they know is going to cost them later, but they're doing it anyway. Victoria laughed despite herself. My assistant thinks I'm having a crisis. 3 board members called to check in. A Marcus Chen sent a very concerned email about my judgment. Sounds fun. Oh, it gets better. Apparently there's a faction that thinks I should step down from the foundation. Let someone more stable take over. She said the last word with enough acid to etch glass. Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching the kids peer at a triceratops skeleton. Are you going to? Step down? Hell no! Victoria's voice came out harder than she intended. I built that foundation from nothing, David and I, before he died. I'm not walking away because some people think my daughter's autism reflects poorly on my leadership abilities. Good. Good? Yeah, good. Screw them. Ethan shoved his hands in his pockets. People love to have opinions about how other people should live, especially when they've never walked a day in those shoes. Your daughter had a sensory overload at a party. You found someone to help. That's not a crisis. That's just life. Anyone who can't see that isn't worth your time. Victoria felt something loosen in her chest. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple. He nodded toward where Lena and Micah were now debating the hunting patterns of allosaurs. Look at them. They don't care about optics or public perception or any of that garbage. They just care about dinosaurs and being understood. Maybe we should take notes. They moved through the exhibit slowly, the kids darting between displays while Victoria and Ethan maintained their parallel orbit. Micah pointed out inaccuracies in the displays with gleeful pedantry. Lena asked questions that forced the museum docents to actually think instead of reciting memorized scripts. At one point, they ended up in front of the massive T-Rex in the main hall, staring up at teeth the size of bananas. You know what I keep thinking about? Victoria said quietly. That night at the Gala, the way everyone just watched, like we were a spectacle, entertainment. People are terrible. Some of them tried to help, security, Patricia, but they didn't know what to do, so they just made it worse. She paused. How did you know? What to do, I mean. Ethan considered this. Micah had a meltdown at school once. Second grade. Teacher tried to restrain him, thought she was helping. Ended up traumatizing him so badly, he wouldn't go back for a week. His voice went flat with old anger. I had to fight the principal, the school board, everyone, just to get them to understand that you can't force a child to be calm. You have to give them space to regulate themselves. Is that what you were doing, giving Lena space? More or less. Offering a model, matching her rhythm, letting her know she wasn't alone but also wasn't being controlled. He glanced at her. Your instinct was to fix it, make it stop. That's what most parents do. But sometimes the best thing you can do is just be present, without agenda. Victoria thought about all the therapy sessions, the behavioral interventions, the carefully structured routines designed to help Lena function better in neurotypical spaces. All of it aimed at changing her daughter instead of changing the spaces. I'm doing it all wrong, she said. You're doing it the way you were taught. Can't blame yourself for that. Ethan turned to look at her fully. But you can choose to do it differently now. I don't know how. Neither do I. I'm figuring it out as I go, same as you. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Difference is, I don't have investors and board members watching my every move. Makes it easier to fail quietly. Before Victoria could respond, Micah came running over, Lena right behind him. Dad, they have an interactive dig site in the basement. Can we go, please? Lead the way, paleontologist. The dig site turned out to be exactly what it sounded like. A large sandbox filled with replica fossils that kids could excavate with brushes and small tools. Micah and Lena dove in immediately, all serious concentration and careful technique. Victoria and Ethan claimed a nearby bench, watching parents corral overexcited children and museum staff patiently explain the same facts over and over. Can I ask you something? Victoria said after a while. Shoot, why are you doing this? Spending your Saturday with someone you barely know, helping her figure out how to be a better parent. What's in it for you? Ethan was quiet for long enough that Victoria thought maybe she'd overstepped. Then he said, after Sarah died, people kept telling me they were there if I needed anything. Casseroles showed up for about 2 weeks. Then everyone went back to their lives. And it was just me and Micah, trying to figure out how to exist in a world that didn't have her in it anymore. He watched Micah carefully brush sand off what looked like a femur. Nobody taught me how to do this, how to be a single parent to a neurodivergent kid while also trying not to drown in grief. I had to figure it out alone, and it was hell. So this is what? Paying it forward? This is me recognizing someone who's struggling with something I understand. He met her eyes. You're not alone, Victoria, even if it feels like it, even if everyone around you is too busy judging to actually help. You're not alone. Victoria felt her throat close up. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in a museum sandbox exhibit. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't met my sister. She's going to have so many opinions about you. Your sister? Rosa. She watches Micah when I work. She's also convinced I need to start dating again, so fair warning, she's going to think this is something it's not. Victoria felt heat creep up her neck. Oh, right, of course, this is just two parents helping each other out. Yeah, that's what I'll tell her too. She won't believe me, but I'll try. They fell into a comfortable silence after that, watching the kids excavate their replica fossils with intense focus. Around them, the museum hummed with weekend energy, families and tourists and school groups all mixing together in the pursuit of knowledge and wonder. What was she like? Victoria found herself asking. Sarah. Ethan smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Loud. She laughed at everything, drove me crazy with her inability to be on time for anything. Worked as a nurse, specialized in pediatrics. That's how she knew, with Micah. Saw the signs early, got him evaluated before most people would have noticed anything. She sounds wonderful. She was. Also stubborn as hell and terrible at cooking, and once convinced me to get matching tattoos of constellations even though I hate needles. He pulled up his sleeve, showed Victoria a small cluster of stars on his forearm. Orion, her favorite. Victoria found herself reaching out, tracing the simple lines with one finger. It's beautiful. She'd be glad someone thinks so. Micah calls it Dad's connect the dots. They talked for another hour, trading stories about their lost spouses, their complicated kids, the thousand small ways life had surprised them. It felt easy in a way Victoria hadn't experienced in years. No performance, no carefully maintained image, just two people being honest about their messy realities. Eventually, the kids wore themselves out, emerging from the dig site covered in sand and triumph. They'd found 3 vertebrae, part of a skull, and what Micah insisted was a coprolite, even though Lena argued it was just a rock. "Lunch?" Ethan suggested. "There's a place nearby that makes decent burgers." "Can we, Mom?" Lena asked, her eyes bright. "Please?" Victoria checked her phone. 2 texts from Patricia, 1 from Marcus, 3 emails marked urgent. All of it could wait. "Burgers sound perfect," she said. The diner Ethan chose was nothing like the restaurants Victoria usually frequented. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, laminated menus that offered everything from breakfast to dinner with equal enthusiasm. The waitress called them Hun and brought crayons for the kids without being asked. Micah and Lena immediately started drawing dinosaurs, comparing techniques and debating anatomical accuracy. Victoria found herself sitting across from Ethan in a booth that had probably been there since the 70s, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been brewed around the same time. It was perfect. "So," Ethan said, stealing a French fry from Micah's plate, "what's next for the Hale Foundation? Assuming you don't let Marcus Chen and his friends push you out." Victoria smiled. "We're expanding to 15 new schools next year, all Title I, high-need populations. The goal is to get literacy programs established before 3rd grade, when the achievement gap starts to really solidify." "That's ambitious." "I don't do things halfway." She paused. "Though lately I'm wondering if maybe I should, if all this ambition is worth it when I'm missing so much with Lena." "Who says you have to choose?" "Everyone. The board, the media, well-meaning friends who suggest I might want to take a step back for my family." Victoria's voice dripped sarcasm, as if men are ever asked to choose between their careers and their children. "Fair point." Ethan sipped his coffee. "For what it's worth, I think you can do both. Just maybe not the way you've been doing them." "Meaning?" "Meaning maybe the foundation could benefit from someone who actually understands what it's like to have a kid who doesn't fit the standard mold. Someone who gets that accommodation isn't the same as lowering expectations." He met her eyes. "You're sitting on perspective most of those board members will never have. Use it." Victoria sat with that. Around them, the diner buzzed with weekend lunch chaos. Families and couples and solo diners all engaged in the small ritual of sharing a meal. Ordinary life unfolding in its ordinary way. But for Victoria, sitting in this cheap booth with her daughter happily drawing dinosaurs across from a boy who understood her, something shifted, clicked into place. She'd been thinking about the foundation all wrong, thinking about it as separate from her life with Lena, when maybe it should be connected. Maybe her daughter's experiences could inform her work, instead of complicating it. "You're right," she said slowly. "I've been trying to compartmentalize, keep everything separate. But maybe that's the problem." "Maybe," Ethan agreed. "Or maybe I'm just talking out of my ass and you should ignore everything I say." "Too late. You've already given me ideas." "Dangerous." They finished lunch and walked back out into the October afternoon. The museum trip had taken longer than Victoria expected, and the sun was already starting its descent toward evening. She should get Lena home, start thinking about dinner and bedtime routines and all the structure that usually defined their weekends. But she found herself not wanting this to end. "Same time next week?" The words came out before she'd fully thought them through. Ethan looked surprised. "Yeah? Yeah, maybe not the museum, but something. The kids clearly enjoy each other's company, and honestly..." She trailed off, not sure how to finish. "Honestly what?" "Honestly, I enjoy your company too." Ethan smiled, real and warm. "I enjoy yours too, even if you are way too fancy for a guy like me." "I'm not fancy. I'm just running a multi-million-dollar foundation while wearing shoes that cost more than my monthly rent?" He raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, totally not fancy." Victoria looked down at her supposedly casual outfit, saw it through his eyes. Even her comfortable shoes were designer. Her simple sweater probably cost $300. She tried to dress down and still looked like she was slumming it. "Point taken," she said. "I'll work on it." "Don't. Be who you are." "I'm just giving you a hard time." He paused. "But maybe next week we do something in my neighborhood. Let you see how the other half lives. I'd like that. They exchanged goodbyes, Micah and Lena doing their complicated handshake again before reluctantly separating. Victoria and Lena climbed back into their car, and Victoria watched through the window as Ethan and Micah headed toward the subway station, hand in hand. I really like Micah, Lena said for the 100th time. I can tell, sweetheart. And I think you like Ethan. Victoria's head snapped around. What makes you say that? You smile different when you talk to him, less tight. Lena went back to looking out the window. It's nice. You should smile like that more. The driver pulled into traffic, and they headed uptown toward home, toward their beautiful brownstone with its perfect furnishings and careful order, toward the life Victoria had built through sheer force of will and determination. But for the first time in years, she found herself wondering if maybe perfect wasn't actually what she needed. Maybe what she needed was something messier, something real, something like sitting in a cheap diner with a janitor who understood her daughter better than trained professionals, eating burgers and talking about dinosaurs like the world wasn't constantly demanding she be someone she wasn't. Her phone buzzed. Marcus Chen, again. She declined the call and turned off her phone entirely. Monday would come soon enough, with all its demands and expectations. But for the rest of today, she was just going to be mom. Just going to listen to Lena recount every detail of the museum trip, smile at her daughter's enthusiasm, and maybe, just maybe, let herself imagine a future that looked different than the one she'd planned. A future that included burgers and dinosaurs, and a man with kind eyes who saw her failures and didn't judge. It felt dangerous and uncertain, and completely unlike anything Victoria Hale was supposed to want, which was exactly why she couldn't stop thinking about it. Monday arrived with all the warmth of a hostile takeover. Victoria walked into her office to find Marcus Chen already waiting, perched on the edge of her desk like he owned it. Patricia hovered near the door, her expression apologetic and anxious in equal measure. "We need to talk," Marcus said without preamble. Victoria set down her bag, took off her coat with deliberate slowness. "Good morning to you too, Marcus." "The board met yesterday. Emergency session. On a Sunday? How dedicated." She moved around him to her chair, forcing him to step aside. A small victory, but she'd take it. "Let me guess. They're concerned." "Victoria, this isn't a joke. Stuart Morrison is threatening to pull his entire investment unless we can guarantee stability and leadership. Morrison's been looking for an excuse to pull out since I rejected his son's application to the junior board. This has nothing to do with stability and everything to do with his ego." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Be that as it may, he's not alone. Eleanor Ashford may have defended you at the gala, but she's also asking questions. So is the Brennan Trust, the Rodriguez Foundation, and about 6 other major donors. They want to know if you're capable of managing both the foundation and your personal situation." "My personal situation?" Victoria's voice could have cut diamonds. "You mean my daughter?" "I mean the very public incident that's been picked apart by every society blog and business publication in the city." Marcus pulled out his phone, started scrolling. "There are think pieces, Victoria, about whether women with special needs children can effectively lead major organizations, about work-life balance and priorities. One of them actually used the phrase divided attention." Victoria felt heat rising in her chest, spreading to her face. "So what are you suggesting? That I step down because my 8-year-old daughter had a sensory overload?" "I'm suggesting you take a leave of absence. 6 months, maybe a year. Let me handle the day-to-day operations while you focus on getting Lena the help she needs." He said it smoothly, like he'd rehearsed this. Probably had. "It would show everyone that you take your responsibilities seriously, both as a leader and a mother. How generous of you to offer to shoulder my burden." "Victoria, no." She stood, planting her hands on the desk. "Absolutely not. I built this foundation from nothing. David and I sat in this very office 7 years ago with nothing but an idea and determination. I've grown our endowment by 300%, expanded our reach to 42 schools, and helped over 15,000 children learn to read. I'm not walking away because Stuart Morrison's fragile ego got bruised." Marcus's expression hardened. "Then you're going to force the board to vote, and I'm telling you right now, you won't like the outcome." "Let them vote. I'll be here either way." "Will you?" He leaned forward. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're already checking out. Canceling meetings, ignoring calls, spending your weekends playing house with some janitor you barely know. Victoria went very still. Excuse me? You think word doesn't travel? You were seen at the Natural History Museum, at a diner in Chelsea, with a maintenance worker and his kid. Marcus's voice dripped contempt. I get that you're lonely, Victoria. David's been gone 3 years. But this is embarrassing. Get out. I'm trying to help you. Get out. Victoria's voice shook with barely controlled rage. And Marcus, start updating your resume, because when this board votes, and I'm still sitting in this chair, you're going to wish you'd kept your mouth shut. Marcus stood, smoothing his tie. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I've made is trusting you. She moved to the door, held it open. We're done here. He left, brushing past Patricia without acknowledgement. The assistant slipped inside, closing the door quietly behind her. I'm sorry, Patricia said. I tried to warn you he was here, but it's fine. Victoria sagged into her chair, suddenly exhausted. When's the board meeting? Thursday, 3 o'clock. Patricia hesitated. Victoria, if there's anything I can do, find me everything you can on precedent. Other nonprofit leaders who've faced challenges, kept their positions. Legal standing, bylaws, anything that supports my case. Victoria pulled up her calendar, already strategizing. And get Eleanor Ashford on the phone. If anyone can talk sense into Stuart Morrison, it's her. Patricia nodded and left. Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at the family photo on her desk. Her, David, and baby Lena, all smiles and hope and the blissful ignorance of people who thought they had everything figured out. She picked up her phone, pulled up Ethan's number, stared at it for a long moment, then set the phone down without calling. What would she even say? That she was about to lose everything because people thought spending time with him made her look unprofessional? That his existence in her life had become ammunition for her enemies? She couldn't drag him into this. Wouldn't. The week crawled forward with agonizing slowness. Victoria prepared for the board meeting with the same intensity she'd once brought to hostile acquisitions. She compiled reports, gathered testimonials from the schools they served, built a presentation that should have buried any question about her competence. But she knew facts wouldn't be enough. This wasn't about performance. It was about perception, about whether a room full of wealthy, mostly male investors could accept a woman who refused to pretend her life was perfect. Wednesday evening, her phone rang. Ethan. She almost didn't answer, but her thumb moved before her brain could stop it. Hey, she said, trying to sound normal. Hey, yourself. You sound terrible. What's wrong? Victoria laughed, the sound hollow. That obvious? I've heard you happy. This isn't that. A pause. Want to talk about it? She did, desperately, but instead she said, just work stuff, nothing I can't handle. Victoria. Really? It's fine. She stopped, started over. Can I ask you something? Shoot. Do you ever feel like the whole world is just waiting for you to fail? Like they're watching every move, cataloging every mistake, building a case for why you shouldn't be where you are? Ethan was quiet for a moment. Every single day. Something in his voice made her throat tighten. Yeah? I'm a single dad working a minimum wage job, raising a neurodivergent kid in a city that costs too much. My neighbors think I'm failing him because he doesn't play outside enough. His teachers think I'm not doing enough therapy. My own mother thinks I should move back to Michigan where family can help. He exhaled slowly. Everyone's got opinions about how I should live my life. Most of them are wrong. How do you deal with it? I stopped listening, focused on what matters. Micah's happiness, our life together, the small moments that don't show up in anyone else's judgment. A pause. Why? Who's coming after you? Victoria told him. About Marcus, the board meeting, Stuart Morrison's ultimatum, about the think pieces and the whispers and the impossible choice between her career and her credibility as a mother. Ethan listened without interrupting. When she finally ran out of words, he said, That's garbage. Which part? All of it. But especially the part where they're using me and Micah as evidence of your poor judgment. They didn't mention you specifically. Don't lie to protect my feelings. I'm a big boy. I can handle knowing some rich people think I'm beneath you. His voice carried an edge she hadn't heard before. What I can't handle is you losing something you care about because of me. This isn't your fault. Didn't say it was, but it's still happening. He was quiet for a beat. You should probably stop seeing us, just until this blows over. The words hit like a fist to the chest. Ethan, I'm serious. Lena can text Micah. They can do video calls, whatever. But the museum trips, the dinners, people are watching. You said it yourself. Don't give them more ammunition. That's not fair to the kids. Life's not fair. They'll survive. His voice softened. You've got a board meeting to win. Focus on that. Everything else can wait. Victoria wanted to argue, but he was right, and they both knew it. Okay. Ethan? Yeah? Thank you for understanding. He laughed, but it sounded sad. Sure, understanding. That's what we'll call it. He hung up before she could respond. Victoria sat in the darkening office, phone still pressed to her ear, feeling like she'd just made a terrible mistake. But what choice did she have? Marcus was right about one thing. Perception mattered. And right now her relationship with Ethan looked like exactly what it wasn't. A distraction, a crisis, a woman losing her grip. Thursday came with gray skies and the promise of rain. Victoria dressed in her armor, Armani suit, Louboutin heels, the diamond studs David had given her for their 5th anniversary. She looked every inch the powerful executive they expected her to be. The boardroom at the foundation headquarters was designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, mahogany table, leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly salary. 17 seats, all filled. Marcus sat at the far end, his expression carefully neutral. Eleanor Ashford gave Victoria a small nod. Stuart Morrison didn't look up from his phone. Victoria took her seat at the head of the table and waited for the murmuring to die down. Thank you all for coming, she began. I understand there are concerns about my leadership. I'd like to address them directly. For the next 20 minutes, she presented her case. Growth metrics, success stories, testimonials from educators whose schools had been transformed by foundation programs. She spoke about literacy rates and achievement gaps and the measurable difference their work made in children's lives. The board listened with varying degrees of attention. Some nodded. Others checked their phones. Stuart Morrison stared at her with undisguised hostility. When she finished, he was the first to speak. Very impressive, Ms. Hale. Your dedication to the Foundation's mission has never been in question. He steepled his fingers. What we're questioning is your capacity to execute on that mission given your personal circumstances. My personal circumstances haven't impacted our performance. If anything, the Gala incident suggests otherwise. You abandoned a room full of donors, left a subordinate to manage your responsibilities, and created a public spectacle that's damaged our reputation. Morrison leaned forward. Furthermore, your recent behavior, canceling meetings, socializing with inappropriate individuals, raises serious questions about your judgment. Victoria kept her voice level. I had one public incident involving my daughter's disability. I've canceled 2 non-essential meetings in 4 years, and my personal life is exactly that, personal. Not when it affects the Foundation's image, Marcus spoke up, his tone regretful. Victoria, we all respect what you've built here, but leadership requires sacrifice. It requires putting the organization first. I do put the organization first. I always have. Then step aside, Morrison said bluntly. Take a leave of absence. Let Marcus run things while you handle your family situation. Come back when you're ready to give this role your full attention. My attention has never wavered. The evidence suggests otherwise. Morrison pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. Inside were photos. Victoria at the museum with Ethan and the kids. At the diner. Walking through the park. Someone had been following her. This doesn't look like someone focused on her professional responsibilities. Victoria felt ice in her veins. You had me followed. I did my due diligence, as any responsible board member would. Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. That man you've been spending time with, he's a janitor, works at one of our partner schools, actually. No college degree, barely making ends meet. Not exactly appropriate company for someone in your position. Appropriate company. Victoria's hands clenched under the table. You mean someone wealthy enough to meet your standards? I mean someone who doesn't raise questions about your judgment and priorities. Eleanor cleared her throat. Stuart, I think we're getting off track here. Victoria's personal relationships are relevant when they impact her professional performance, Morrison interrupted. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to this organization. We cannot allow sentiment to override sound business judgment. Then let's vote, Victoria said flatly. That's why we're here, isn't it? To determine whether I keep my position. So let's vote. The room went silent. 17 people, all watching her. Some sympathetic, some calculating, some already decided. Marcus shifted in his seat. Victoria, if you just consider... No more discussion, no more debate. We vote now. The vote took 3 minutes. When it was done, 9-8 in Victoria's favor, the room felt like it had lost all its oxygen. Morrison stood slowly. This isn't over. I'm withdrawing my family's support from the foundation. $3 million annually. Let's see how long your programs survive without it. He left, 4 other board members following. The door closed behind them with a definitive click. Victoria sat very still, trying to process what had just happened. She'd won, technically, but the victory felt hollow, purchased at a cost she was only beginning to calculate. Eleanor approached, placed a hand on her shoulder. That took courage. Did it? Because it feels like I just lost a third of our operating budget. Morrison was looking for an excuse. If it wasn't this, it would have been something else. Eleanor's eyes were sharp behind her glasses. But Victoria, dear, you need to be smarter. The world isn't fair to women in power. You know this. We can't afford the same mistakes men make without consequence. Being a parent isn't a mistake. No, but being photographed with a man of significantly lower social standing while under professional scrutiny is poor strategy. She said it gently, but the words still stung. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying it's reality. Victoria nodded numbly. Eleanor left. Soon the boardroom emptied until only Marcus remained. You should have taken the leave, he said. Probably. I wasn't trying to undermine you. I genuinely thought it was the best solution. Victoria looked at him, really looked. Saw the ambition there, yes, but also something else. Genuine concern, maybe. Or just good strategy masked as care. With Marcus, it was always hard to tell. I know, she said finally. But I can't step back, not now. This is all I have left of David. The foundation, the work. It's the only part of him that's still alive. Marcus's expression softened fractionally. Then we need to do damage control. Morrison isn't bluffing about the money. We'll need to find new donors, fast. And Victoria? He paused at the door. Whatever you've got going with the janitor, end it, before someone else uses it against you. He left her alone in the vast boardroom, surrounded by empty chairs and the ghost of her narrow victory. Victoria pulled out her phone. No messages. She scrolled to Ethan's number, stared at it. Then she put the phone away and went back to work. The next week passed in a blur of damage control and donor meetings. Victoria threw herself into fundraising with desperate intensity, making calls and taking meetings and crafting pitches designed to fill the $3 million hole Morrison had left. Patricia worked 18-hour days alongside her, subsisting on coffee and determination. They found some success. The Brennan Trust increased their commitment. A tech billionaire Victoria had courted for months finally agreed to a substantial donation. Slowly, painfully, the budget gap began to close. But at night, alone in her brownstone with Lena asleep upstairs, Victoria felt the walls closing in. She'd won the battle and maybe lost something more important in the process. Lena noticed the absence immediately. When are we seeing Micah again? She asked on Saturday morning, the first weekend since the museum trip. Victoria looked up from her laptop where she'd been reviewing grant applications. I don't know, sweetheart. I'm pretty busy right now. You're always busy. Lena twisted her hands together, a sure sign of anxiety. Did I do something wrong? Is that why we can't see them? No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. It's just complicated adult stuff. You mean the people at work who don't like that Micah's dad isn't rich? Victoria's head snapped up. Where did you hear that? I'm 8, not deaf. I hear you on the phone. I know people think Ethan isn't good enough. Lena's voice wobbled. But he helped me when no one else could. Doesn't that count for something? Victoria set aside her laptop, pulled Lena into a hug. Her daughter stiffened for a second, then relaxed into it. It counts for everything, Victoria whispered. And you're right, Ethan is wonderful. He helped you when I couldn't. That matters more than anything those people think. Then why can't we see them? Because I'm a coward, Victoria thought. Because I'm protecting my career instead of fighting for what's right. Because I'm exactly as bad as Marcus and Stuart Morrison, just with better excuses. I'm going to fix this, she said instead. I promise. But she didn't know how. The foundation needed her. 15 schools, thousands of children, all depending on the program she'd built. How could she risk that for personal happiness? For a friendship that had barely started? Sunday afternoon, her phone rang. Unknown number. Miss Hale? This is Rosa Mendez, Ethan's sister. Victoria sat up straighter. Oh, hello. Is everything okay? That depends on your definition of okay. Rosa's voice was warm but carried an edge. Look, I'm calling because my brother is an idiot who thinks he's being noble, and Micah is miserable because Lena disappeared, so I'm taking matters into my own hands. I'm not sure what you want me to... I want you to meet me for coffee. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock, the Starbucks on Broadway and 95th. Come alone. Ms. Mendez, Rosa. And I'm not asking. I'm telling. Ethan doesn't know I'm calling. He'd kill me if he did. But someone needs to talk sense into both of you, and apparently I'm elected. A pause. You coming or not? Victoria should say no, should maintain distance, protect her position, keep everything professional and separated. Instead, she heard herself say, I'll be there. Monday at 1 o'clock found Victoria walking into a Starbucks that looked like every other Starbucks in the city. Rosa was already there, sitting in the back corner with 2 coffees. She was shorter than Victoria expected, curvy where Ethan was lean with the same dark hair and sharp eyes. You came, Rosa said as Victoria sat down. Good. That's the first smart thing you've done in weeks. Victoria bristled. I don't know you well enough for you to judge my decisions. Don't you? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to throw away something real because some rich people are uncomfortable. Rosa pushed one of the coffees across the table. Ethan told me what happened, the board meeting, the photos, all of it. And I get it. You've got responsibilities, a career, a reputation to protect. But you know what else you've got? What? A daughter who finally made a friend. A chance at something that might make you happy for the first time since your husband died. And my brother, who's been walking around like a ghost for 2 years, actually smiling again. Rosa leaned forward. So yeah, I'm judging your decisions because they're stupid. Victoria should be offended, should stand up and walk out. Instead, she found herself saying, it's not that simple. It never is, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. Rosa sipped her coffee. Let me tell you about Ethan. After Sarah died, he fell apart, completely. Couldn't work, couldn't function, barely remembered to feed himself. Micah was the only thing keeping him going, and even then, it was touch and go for months. I didn't know it was that bad. Most people don't. Ethan's good at hiding, good at pretending he's fine when he's drowning. Rosa's eyes softened. But with you, he's not pretending. He's actually okay. Better than okay. And I'll be damned if I let him give that up because he thinks he's protecting you. He is protecting me. If we keep seeing each other, it gives my enemies ammunition. They're already questioning my judgment. So prove them wrong. Rosa's voice hardened. You run a foundation that helps thousands of kids, right? You built it from nothing, grew it into something that actually matters. That's not the resume of someone with poor judgment. That's the resume of someone who knows what's important and fights for it. It's different when it's personal. No, it's not. It's only different because you're letting them make it different. Rosa finished her coffee, crushed the cup with more force than necessary. Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're a grown woman. You'll make your own choices. But I'm going to tell you this. My brother deserves to be happy. Micah deserves to have Lena in his life. And from what I've seen, you deserve more than a life where you let other people's prejudices dictate your decisions. She stood, grabbed her bag. Think about it. And when you're done thinking, maybe remember that the best things in life are usually the ones that scare us most. Rosa left. Victoria sat alone with her untouched coffee, staring at nothing. That evening, after Lena was in bed, Victoria sat in David's study and thought about fear, about the choices she'd made and the ones she'd avoided, about what it meant to be brave when the stakes were this high. Her phone sat on the desk, silent and accusing. She picked it up, pulled up Ethan's number, stared at it for a long time. Then she started typing. The message was simple. Can we talk? I think I've been an idiot. The response came almost immediately. Join the club. When and where? Victoria smiled despite herself. Tomorrow night, after Lena's asleep? I can come to you. A pause. Then, you sure? Long way to Washington Heights for someone who might be making a mistake. I'm sure. Send me your address. The address came through. Victoria looked at it, felt her heart hammering. This was insane. She was risking everything. Her career, her reputation, the foundation's stability. All for what? A friendship? Something more? She didn't even know what to call it. But Rosa was right about one thing. The best things in life were usually the ones that scared her most. And Victoria was done running from fear. Tuesday evening, Victoria stood outside a pre-war building on 157th Street, checking the address 3 times to make sure she had it right. The neighborhood was nothing like the Upper East Side. Bodegas instead of boutiques, fire escapes zigzagging down brick facades. The rumble of the A-train somewhere beneath her feet. Her driver had given her a concerned look when she'd asked him to drop her here, but she'd waved him off with instructions to come back in 2 hours. Now, standing on the cracked sidewalk with her coat pulled tight against the November wind, she wondered if this was the stupidest thing she'd ever done, or maybe the bravest. The line between the two felt razor thin. She pressed the buzzer for apartment 4B. Static crackled through the intercom, then Ethan's voice. Come on up, doors open. The building's lobby smelled like cooking spices and old carpet. Victoria climbed 4 flights of stairs, her heels clicking against worn linoleum, and found Ethan waiting in the doorway of his apartment. You came, he said, sounding surprised despite the fact that she'd told him she would. I said I would. Yeah, but I figured you'd change your mind, text some excuse about a work emergency or Lena needing you. He stepped back, gesturing her inside. Glad I was wrong. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom visible through an open door where Victoria could see bunk beds and dinosaur posters. A living area that served triple duty as kitchen, dining room, and what looked like Micah's homework station based on the papers scattered across a folding table. Everything was clean but worn, the furniture mismatched, the kind of place held together by necessity rather than design. It was nothing like Victoria's brownstone, and somehow that made her chest ache. Micah's with Rosa, Ethan said, clearing some books off the couch so Victoria could sit. Figured we needed to talk without an audience. Good call. Victoria sat, then immediately stood again, too nervous to stay still. Your sister called me. Yesterday. Ethan's eyes widened. She what? Met me for coffee. Told me I was being an idiot and that I needed to stop running. Victoria managed a weak smile. She's very direct. She's a pain in my ass is what she is. But Ethan said it with affection. What did she say exactly? That you've been miserable. That Micah misses Lena. That I'm letting other people's prejudices make my decisions for me. Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. She wasn't wrong. Ethan moved to the window, stared out at the street below. I told you to stay away. Told you it was the smart play. Since when do either of us make smart plays? He turned to face her. Victoria, I meant what I said. I'm not going to be the reason you lose everything you've worked for. You're not the reason. Marcus is the reason. Stuart Morrison is the reason. A whole system that can't handle a woman who doesn't fit their perfect little box is the reason. She took a step closer. You're just the excuse they're using. If it wasn't you, they'd find something else. That doesn't make it better. No. But it makes it clear that running away won't fix anything. Victoria felt her voice strengthen. I won the board vote. Barely, but I won. And Morrison pulled his funding, but we're recovering. We'll be okay. At what cost? That's what I'm trying to figure out. She closed the distance between them, close enough now to see the exhaustion in his face, the lines carved deeper than they should be for a man not yet 40. Ethan, I've spent 3 years building walls, keeping everything controlled and separated and safe. Work over here, Lena over there, grief locked away where it can't touch anything. And it's been killing me so slowly I didn't even notice. Victoria, let me finish, please. She took a breath. Then you showed up at that gala and you saw my daughter, really saw her, not as a problem to fix or a deficit to overcome, but as a person who needed something specific in that moment. And I realized I'd been so busy trying to manage everything that I'd stopped actually living. Ethan was quiet, watching her with those dark eyes that missed nothing. I don't know what this is, Victoria continued, gesturing between them. This thing we're doing, but I know it matters. I know Lena lights up when she talks about Micah. I know I feel more like myself around you than I have in years. And I'm done pretending that doesn't count for something. Even if it costs you everything? It won't cost me everything. It might cost me some things. Maybe some things that needed to go anyway. She managed a shaky smile. Rosa was right. I'm done letting fear make my decisions. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Then he said, "You want some coffee? Because this feels like a conversation that needs coffee." Victoria laughed despite herself. "Yeah, coffee sounds good." He moved to the kitchen, 3 steps from where they'd been standing, and started pulling mugs from a cabinet. The coffee maker was ancient, the kind with a glass carafe that probably came from a thrift store. But it worked, filling the small apartment with the smell of brewing coffee. "Micah's been asking about Lena nonstop," Ethan said as he poured. "Wants to know if he did something wrong, if she doesn't want to be friends anymore. I've tried explaining that it's complicated adult stuff, but he's 10. He doesn't get why grown-ups make things so hard." Lena's been asking too. I told her the same thing. Victoria accepted the mug he offered, wrapped her hands around its warmth. "We hurt them by trying to protect ourselves." "Yeah, we did." Ethan leaned against the counter. "So what now? You want to schedule another museum trip, pretend the past 2 weeks didn't happen?" "I want to stop pretending, period." Victoria set down her mug. "I want to figure out how to do this, whatever this is, without hiding, without apologizing, without letting people like Marcus and Stuart Morrison dictate how I live my life." "That's a nice speech. But you still run a foundation that needs those people's money." "Do I, though? Really?" Victoria felt something clicking into place, an idea that had been forming since her conversation with Rosa. What if we didn't need their money? What if we found different donors, different supporters, people who actually care about the mission instead of just wanting a tax write-off and social standing? Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You're talking about completely restructuring your donor base. I'm talking about building something better, something that doesn't depend on the approval of people who think my daughter's disability is an embarrassment, or that your economic status determines your worth as a person." She started pacing, energy building. "The foundation helps kids learn to read. That's the mission. Everything else, the galas, the society connections, the performance, that's just machinery. And maybe it's time to rebuild the machine." "That's ambitious. Also possibly insane." "Probably both." Victoria stopped pacing, looked at him directly. "But I didn't build that foundation by playing it safe. David and I, we started with nothing but an idea that every child deserves literacy. We believed it enough to risk everything. When did I stop being that person?" "When your husband died and you had to survive alone." The words hit hard because they were true. Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, blinked them back. "Yeah, maybe." Ethan set down his own mug, moved closer. "For what it's worth, I think you're still that person. You just forgot for a while." "How do you know?" "Because you're here, in my crappy apartment in Washington Heights, talking about rebuilding your entire funding model rather than cutting me out of your life. That takes the same guts that built a foundation from scratch." He smiled slightly. "Also, you're kind of terrifying when you get that look in your eyes." "What look?" "The one that says you've made up your mind and anyone who gets in your way is going to regret it." Victoria found herself smiling back. "I learned that look from boardrooms full of men who assumed I'd fold under pressure." "Did you? Fold?" "Not once." They stood there in his tiny kitchen, coffee cooling in their mugs, the sound of the city filtering through thin walls. Victoria could hear someone's television in the apartment below, the rumble of traffic, a siren wailing in the distance. Normal life, messy and loud and completely uncontrolled. It felt perfect. "I need to tell you something," Ethan said quietly, "about why I really pushed you away. You said it was to protect me. That was part of it, but the other part..." He ran a hand through his hair, not meeting her eyes. "I was scared. Scared that if we kept doing this, if we got closer, I'd start hoping for something real. And I can't afford hope. Not anymore. Hope is what killed me when Sarah died." Victoria's throat tightened. "Ethan, I loved her so much it hurt. And when she was gone, that love had nowhere to go except into missing her, into this hole that won't fill no matter how hard I try. His voice cracked. I can't do that again. Can't let myself care that much and risk losing it. So you'd rather be alone. I'd rather be safe. Victoria thought about her own walls, her carefully controlled life, about the cost of safety. Being safe is just another way of being dead. We're both doing it. You with your grief, me with my need for control. And meanwhile, our kids are the ones teaching us how to actually live. When did they get smarter than us? Probably the moment they were born. We've just been too stubborn to notice. Ethan laughed, the sound raw but genuine. So what do we do? Two broken people trying not to screw up their kids while also trying not to screw up whatever this is? I don't know, but I think we start by being honest. With each other, with ourselves, with Lena and Micah. Victoria moved closer, close enough to reach out and take his hand. He let her. No more pushing away because we're scared. No more pretending it's noble to suffer alone. That's going to be messy. Good. I'm sick of things being neat and controlled. She squeezed his hand. Let's be messy together. Ethan looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. You sure about this? Because once we cross this line, once we stop pretending this is just two parents helping each other out, there's no going back. People will talk. Your board will have opinions. It's going to get ugly. It's already ugly. At least this way we're not facing it alone. He pulled her into a hug. Not romantic, not sexual, just two people holding each other up against the weight of everything they were carrying. Victoria pressed her face into his shoulder and breathed in the smell of laundry detergent and coffee and something essentially him. Okay, he said into her hair. Okay, let's be messy together. They stood like that for a long moment. Then Victoria's phone buzzed. She pulled back reluctantly, checking the screen. Patricia. The text was short. Morrison's talking to the press. Says you're unfit to lead. Wants a quote from you. Victoria showed Ethan the message. He read it, his jaw tightening. What are you going to tell them? The truth. She typed quickly. Tell Morrison he can read my statement in tomorrow's Times. Then call Jeffrey Chen at the paper. Tell him I've got a story for him. She hit send, looked up at Ethan. I'm going public, about Lena, about the challenges, about all of it. If Morrison wants to make this about my fitness to lead, fine. Let's have that conversation out in the open. That's risky. Everything worth doing is risky. Victoria felt that familiar fire building in her chest, the one that had gotten her through law school and hostile acquisitions and building a foundation from nothing. I'm done playing defense. Time to go on offense. Ethan grinned. There's that terrifying look again. Over the next few hours, they planned. Ethan made more coffee while Victoria worked her phone, calling in favors and setting pieces in motion. Jeffrey Chen at the Times agreed to meet her first thing in the morning. Eleanor Ashford, when Victoria called her, laughed and said it was about damn time someone called Stuart Morrison's bluff. Even Marcus, surprisingly, said he'd back her play, though his support came with a warning that this could backfire spectacularly. By the time Victoria's driver texted that he'd arrived, the strategy was set. She'd give the Times an interview about leadership and parenthood and the false choice between career success and having a life. She'd talk about Lena openly, about neurodivergence and accommodation and what it really meant to support families. And yes, she'd mention Ethan, not as a scandal, but as a friend who'd shown her what real understanding looked like. It was either brilliant or career suicide. Time would tell which. You should go, Ethan said, walking her to the door, before your driver thinks I've kidnapped you. He probably already does. Victoria paused on the threshold. Thursday. Let's do something with the kids. I don't care who sees us. You sure? Positive. We've hidden long enough. She left before she could second-guess herself, taking the stairs quickly and emerging onto the street where her car waited like a portal back to her other life. But as she slid into the back seat and the driver pulled into traffic, Victoria realized something had shifted. Those two lives, the controlled executive and the struggling parent, weren't separate anymore. They were the same person, and it was time everyone else figured that out too. The Times interview happened Wednesday morning in a quiet corner of a midtown cafe. Jeffrey Chen was younger than Victoria expected, mid-30s with sharp eyes and a recording device that he set on the table between them like a challenge. So, he said after the preliminaries, Stuart Morrison says you're mentally unstable, that your daughter's condition has compromised your judgment. Want to respond? Victoria had prepared for this moment, rehearsed her answers, workshopped her talking points. But sitting across from this reporter with his blunt questions, she found herself throwing out the script. My daughter has autism, she said simply. She processes sensory information differently than neurotypical people. Sometimes that means she gets overwhelmed in environments that most of us can tolerate. It doesn't make her less intelligent or less capable. It just makes her different. And that affects your leadership how? It makes me better at it, because I understand something most of my board members don't. That difference isn't deficit. That accommodation isn't lowering standards. That the kids we serve deserve programs designed around who they actually are, not who we wish they'd be. Victoria leaned forward. Stuart Morrison thinks my daughter's disability is embarrassing. I think his ignorance is embarrassing. Jeffrey's eyebrows rose. Strong words. I'm done with weak ones. For 3 years I've been trying to be perfect. The perfect CEO, the perfect mother, the perfect widow. And all it's done is make me smaller, less effective, less human. She took a breath. The Hale Foundation was built on the idea that every child deserves to reach their potential. Well, my daughter is teaching me that potential looks different for everyone. And maybe it's time we applied that lesson to more than just literacy programs. What do you mean? And Victoria told him about the Gala, about Ethan, about the revelation that expertise didn't always come with credentials, about the decision to rebuild her donor base around people who actually cared about impact rather than social standing, about choosing honesty over performance. Jeffrey wrote everything down, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just letting her talk. When she finally ran out of words, he sat back and whistled softly. This is going to cause a shitstorm, he said. Good. Maybe a shitstorm is what we need. The article ran Friday morning, front page of the business section. Victoria read it 3 times before Lena woke up, her coffee going cold as she absorbed seeing her own words in print. The headline was perfect. Foundation CEO rejects perfect leader myth, embraces reality of parenthood and disability. By 9 a.m., her phone was exploding. Patricia called 4 times. Marcus sent a text that just said, Jesus Christ, Victoria. Eleanor Ashford left a voicemail cackling with delight, and Stuart Morrison predictably released a statement calling her unstable and unfit. But there were other responses too. Parents of neurodivergent children, thanking her for speaking publicly. Educators praising her honesty. Donors, different donors, smaller but more numerous, reaching out to offer support. And one text from Ethan. You're either a genius or completely insane. Either way, I'm impressed. Victoria smiled and typed back. Definitely insane. Still meeting Thursday? Wouldn't miss it. Micah's been planning all week. Thursday afternoon, Victoria picked up Lena from school and headed downtown instead of uptown. They met Ethan and Micah at a playground near Battery Park. Nothing fancy, just swings and slides and kids running around in the late autumn chill. This time, Victoria didn't hide, didn't check over her shoulder or worry about who might see. When Lena ran off to play with Micah, Victoria sat on a bench next to Ethan and just existed. Watching their kids, drinking terrible coffee from a food truck, talking about nothing important. A photographer caught them there. Victoria saw the flash, saw the woman with the camera trying to be subtle. She could have left, could have created distance, could have protected the optics. Instead, she waved. The photographer looked startled, then laughed and waved back. You know that's going to be in the tabloids tomorrow, Ethan said. Probably. Along with some headline about how I'm dating the help or having a breakdown or whatever they want to make up. Victoria shrugged. Let them write what they want. I know the truth. Which is? That I'm a mother trying to do right by my daughter. That I'm a woman learning to be honest about my life instead of hiding it. And that I'm lucky enough to have found someone who gets that, even when it's hard. Ethan bumped her shoulder with his. You know Morrison's going to fight dirty now. The article made him look bad. He'll want revenge. Let him come. I'm ready. And she was. For the first time in 3 years, Victoria felt ready for whatever came next. Not because she had all the answers or a perfect plan, but because she'd stopped pretending she needed either one. The kids ran over, breathless and laughing. Micah had leaves in his hair. Lena's tights were ripped at the knee. Can we get hot chocolate? Lena asked. Please? There's a place Micah knows that has the really good kind with marshmallows. Victoria looked at Ethan. He shrugged. It's pretty good hot chocolate. Then lead the way. They walked through the park as the sun dropped toward the horizon, 2 adults and 2 kids, completely unremarkable except for the fact that they'd chosen each other against all logic and convenience, chosen honesty over safety, chosen connection over control. The hot chocolate place was tiny, barely more than a window in a wall, but the chocolate was indeed very good. They sat on a nearby bench drinking it, Lena and Micah chattering about some video game Victoria didn't understand while Ethan tried to explain the rules and only made it more confusing. Normal. Messy. Real. Victoria's phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, but something made her check, a text from an unknown number. Ms. Hale, my name is Jennifer Torres. I'm a teacher at PS 147, one of your foundation schools. I read your article and wanted you to know it meant everything to me. My son has autism. I've been hiding it from my colleagues because I was afraid they'd think I couldn't handle my job. Your honesty gave me courage. Thank you. Victoria read the message twice, felt something expand in her chest. She showed it to Ethan. That's why you did it, he said quietly. The interview. Not to beat Morrison or prove a point. For people like her. Maybe. Or maybe I did it for me and it just happened to help someone else too. Victoria pocketed her phone. Either way, it feels right. They finished their hot chocolate as streetlights began to flicker on across the city. Eventually, they'd have to go home, back to their separate apartments and separate lives. But for now, they were here, together, choosing each other one small moment at a time. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't neat, it wasn't controlled. It was real, and that was enough. The backlash hit harder than Victoria expected. By Monday morning, 3 more board members had resigned, citing philosophical differences and concerns about leadership direction. Marcus showed up at her office before 8, looking like he hadn't slept. We're hemorrhaging donors, he said without preamble, dropping a folder on her desk. Morrison's been working the phones all weekend. Half our major contributors are reassessing their commitment. Victoria scanned the list. Some names she'd expected. Others stung more than she wanted to admit. How bad? 5.2 million in annual pledges. Gone. Marcus slumped into a chair. Victoria, I supported your play with the Times. I really did. But we can't run programs without money. We've got teachers depending on us, kids in 15 schools counting on these literacy programs. What's the plan? The plan is we find better donors. In what universe? You just publicly alienated everyone with real money. He rubbed his face. Look, I get what you're trying to do. The honesty thing, the authenticity, it's admirable. But admirable doesn't pay salaries. Victoria stood, moved to the window overlooking Fifth Avenue. Below, the city churned with its usual intensity, indifferent to her crisis. You remember why we started this foundation, David and I? Because literacy is fundamental to... No, I mean the real reason. She turned to face him. We started it because David tutored a kid in our neighborhood, 10-year-old boy who couldn't read, smart as hell, but he'd been written off by everyone, teachers, parents, the system. David spent 6 months working with him. By the end, that kid was reading at grade level. I've heard this story. Then you know what happened next. That kid went on to graduate high school, got into community college. Last I heard, he's a dental hygienist in Queens with 2 kids of his own. Victoria's voice strengthened. We didn't start this foundation to impress rich people or throw fancy galas. We started it because one kid mattered, and if we have to choose between keeping Stuart Morrison happy and actually helping children, I know which one David would pick. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You're going to rebuild from scratch. Not from scratch, from something better, from people who care about impact instead of status. She pulled out her phone, showed him the dozens of messages that had poured in since the article. Teachers, parents, small donors offering $5, $50, whatever they could spare. Look at this. These are people who get it, who understand what we're actually trying to do. You can't fund a multi-million-dollar operation on $5 donations. No, but I can fund it on $10,000 $5 donations, 100,000. 1 million people who care a little instead of 100 people who care about being seen caring. Victoria felt the idea crystallizing as she spoke. We go grassroots, crowdfunding, community partnerships, corporate matching programs. We diversify so we're never dependent on people like Morrison again. That's a massive undertaking. It'll take months, maybe years to... Then we start now. She moved back to her desk, already pulling up contacts. I need you to set up a meeting with our program directors, all of them. I want to know exactly what we need to keep operations running for the next 6 months while we rebuild the funding model. Marcus stared at her. You're serious? Completely. Are you in or out? He stood slowly, something shifting in his expression. You know what? I'm in. Morrison's an ass anyway. And those board members who quit? They were dead weight. We can do better. We will do better. Victoria extended her hand. Partners? Marcus shook it. Partners. But Victoria, if we crash and burn, I'm blaming you. Fair enough. Over the next 3 weeks, Victoria worked harder than she'd ever worked in her life. She restructured the foundation's entire funding model, reaching out to tech companies for corporate sponsorships, launching a crowdfunding campaign that went viral after a celebrity picked it up on social media, partnering with community organizations that brought both resources and credibility. The traditional donors stayed away, but new ones appeared, thousands of them, small contributions adding up to something substantial. Teachers created fundraising pages for their schools. Parents organized bake sales and car washes. A group of teenagers in Brooklyn held a literacy-themed concert and donated the proceeds. It was messy and chaotic, and nothing like the controlled elegance of foundation galas. It was also working. Through it all, Ethan was there. Not in the office or at meetings. He still had his own job, his own life to manage. But in the evenings, after Lena and Micah were asleep, they'd talk on the phone for hours. He became her sounding board, challenging her assumptions and asking the questions no one else dared to ask. What happens if it doesn't work? He asked one night, 3 weeks into the rebuilding process. What if the money doesn't come through? Victoria was curled up in David's study, laptop balanced on her knees, spreadsheets swimming before her tired eyes. Then we scale back, run fewer programs, help fewer kids. But we do it on our terms, with partners who actually believe in the mission. That's not really an answer. It's the only answer I've got. She rubbed her eyes. Ethan, I can't think about failure right now. I just need to keep moving forward. Okay, but you also need to sleep. When's the last time you slept more than 4 hours? Sleep is overrated. Victoria, fine, I'll sleep. Eventually. She smiled despite her exhaustion. How's Micah doing? Good. He and Lena have been video chatting every night. Did you know they're writing a story together? Something about time-traveling dinosaurs who solve mysteries. Lena mentioned it. She's been drawing illustrations. Victoria felt warmth spread through her chest. They're good for each other. Yeah, they are. A pause. You know Morrison's planning something, right? He's been too quiet. Victoria had noticed. After the initial fury and donor exodus, Stuart Morrison had gone silent. No more press statements, no more angry calls. Just an ominous quiet that made her skin crawl. Let him plan. We'll deal with it when it comes. You sound confident. I'm terrified, but I'm done letting fear run my life. The blow came on a Thursday, 6 weeks after the Times article. Victoria was in a meeting with potential corporate sponsors when Patricia burst in, her face pale. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. Now. The sponsors looked affronted at the interruption, but Victoria excused herself and followed Patricia to her office. Marcus was already there, his expression grim, laptop open to a news site. The headline made Victoria's stomach drop. Hale Foundation under investigation for financial irregularities. She scanned the article with growing horror. Anonymous sources claiming misuse of funds, suggestions of improper expense reporting, questions about whether donation money had been used for personal purposes. All of it vague enough to avoid libel, but specific enough to sound damning. It's all lies, Marcus said immediately. I've been through our books 100 times. Everything is clean, everything is documented, but it doesn't matter if it's true, Victoria finished. The accusation alone is enough to destroy us. Morrison, Marcus said flatly. Has to be. This has his fingerprints all over it. Victoria's phone started ringing. Patricia's phone. The office line. All of them simultaneously as media outlets scrambled for comment. Don't answer, Victoria said. Not until we have a strategy. She spent the next hour on the phone with the foundation's lawyers, learning that an official investigation had indeed been opened based on an anonymous complaint. It would take weeks, maybe months, to clear their name. In the meantime, every potential donor would see those headlines and walk away. The crowdfunding campaign stalled within hours. Corporate sponsors pulled back, citing need for clarity before proceeding. The parents and teachers who'd been so enthusiastic suddenly went quiet, probably wondering if their contributions had funded Victoria's lifestyle rather than literacy programs. By evening, Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at the ruins of everything she'd tried to build. Her phone buzzed. Ethan. "I saw the news," he said when she answered. "How bad?" "Catastrophic. Even when we're cleared, and we will be cleared, the damage will be done. No one's going to trust us." Her voice cracked. Morrison won. He found a way to destroy everything without looking like the villain. "Come over." "Ethan, I can't. I have to figure out." "You have to take a breath and remember you're not alone in this. Come over. Bring Lena. Rosa's making dinner and there's more than enough." Victoria wanted to argue. Should stay at the office, work the phones, start damage control. But she was so tired, so completely exhausted, and the thought of Ethan's cramped apartment, Rosa's cooking, the simple normalcy of it all. "Okay, we'll be there in an hour." Rosa's cooking turned out to be arroz con pollo that filled Ethan's apartment with warmth and spice. Lena and Micah disappeared into the bedroom to work on their dinosaur story while the adults sat around the folding table, eating and talking. Rosa had opinions about everything, delivered with the bluntness of someone who'd never learned to soften her edges. "Morrison's a coward, going after your money instead of facing you directly." "He's also effective," Victoria said. "By tomorrow morning, the foundation will be radioactive. No one will touch us." "So you fight back. You show them the books. Prove it's all lies." "That takes time, and in the meantime, we're dead in the water." Victoria pushed food around her plate. "Maybe I should step down. Let Marcus take over, bring in someone without my baggage. Give the foundation a chance to survive." "Absolutely not." Ethan's voice was sharp. "That's exactly what Morrison wants. You step down, he gets to claim victory, and every other person who's ever been attacked for being honest learns to keep their mouth shut." "But if staying means the foundation dies, then we find another way." He leaned forward. "Victoria, you told me once that you didn't build this thing by playing it safe, that you and David risked everything because you believed every kid deserved to read. When did Morrison's opinion become more important than that belief?" "When his lies started affecting real children. We've got programs scheduled to start in January, teachers counting on us. If we can't deliver, we'll deliver." Rosa stood, started clearing plates with efficient movements. "You need proof the money went where it was supposed to go? Show them, all of it. Every receipt, every program, every kid you've helped. Make it so transparent that even Morrison can't spin it." Victoria blinked. "A full financial disclosure? Everything public, completely open." "Exactly. Turn his weapon against him." Rosa dumped plates in the sink. "You've got nothing to hide, right? So hide nothing. Let people see exactly where every dollar went." "That's actually brilliant." Victoria pulled out her phone, already texting Marcus. "It'll take work, organizing everything for public consumption, but if we can show..." "You can show that you're everything Morrison isn't," Ethan finished. "Honest, transparent, actually committed to the mission instead of just your own ego." The plan came together over the next week. Marcus coordinated with their accountants to create a comprehensive financial report, every donation and expenditure documented and explained. Patricia worked with program directors to gather impact data, test scores, reading levels, testimonials from teachers and parents. Victoria herself wrote a letter explaining everything, holding nothing back about the foundation's current crisis and her determination to prove their integrity. They published it all on the foundation's website. Every number, every document, every piece of evidence that showed where the money went and what it accomplished. Then Victoria held a press conference, standing before cameras and reporters, and invited everyone to examine their work. "We have nothing to hide," she said, her voice steady despite the cameras and the hostile questions, and Stuart Morrison sitting in the back row with a smug expression. "Every dollar donated to the Hale Foundation has gone exactly where we promised it would, to helping children learn to read. We're not perfect. We've made mistakes. but we've never been dishonest about our mission or our impact. Ms. Hale, a reporter called out, how do you respond to accusations that you've used foundation resources for personal benefit? I respond by showing you the evidence that proves otherwise. It's all on our website, available to anyone who wants to verify. My personal expenses are my own. Foundation expenses are documented and appropriate. Anyone claiming different is either misinformed or lying. She looked directly at Morrison as she said it. He didn't flinch, but his smile tightened fractionally. What about your relationship with Ethan Cole? Another reporter asked. Critics say it represents poor judgment. My friendship with Ethan represents the best judgment I've made in years. He's a single father doing everything he can for his son. He works hard, loves deeply, and understands something a lot of wealthy people don't, that worth isn't measured in dollars. Victoria felt her voice strengthen. If people want to criticize me for valuing character over bank accounts, they can get in line. I'm done apologizing for seeing clearly. The press conference continued for another 30 minutes. By the time it ended, Victoria felt wrung out, but also strangely lighter. She'd said everything she needed to say. Now it was up to everyone else to decide what they believed. The response started slowly, then built momentum. Independent journalists examined the financial disclosures and found everything clean. Educators praised the transparency. Parents shared stories of how foundation programs had helped their children. The investigation, faced with overwhelming evidence of proper conduct, quietly concluded that there was no basis for charges. And then something unexpected happened. A coalition of smaller nonprofits, impressed by the foundation's openness, reached out about collaboration. Tech companies that had pulled back reconsidered, offering not just money, but resources, software, training, infrastructure. The crowdfunding campaign, dormant for weeks, suddenly exploded as people rallied around what they saw as an underdog fighting against corrupt power. Within a month, the foundation's funding had not only recovered, it had grown, different money, from different sources, but more stable and more aligned with their actual mission. Stuart Morrison made one last attempt, showing up uninvited at a foundation event in February. Victoria was talking with a group of teachers when she saw him enter, flanked by two men in expensive suits. She excused herself and walked directly to him. You're not welcome here. It's a public event. I have every right. No, you don't. This is a private function for foundation partners and supporters. You're neither. She kept her voice low but firm. You tried to destroy us because you couldn't control us. It didn't work. Now leave before I call security. Morrison's face reddened. You think you've won? You've made yourself a pariah. No respectable organization will work with you. You'll always be the unstable woman who chose a janitor over professional credibility. You're right about one thing. I did choose Ethan. I chose honesty over performance, impact over status, and real connection over whatever hollow version of success you're selling. Victoria stepped closer. And you know what? I sleep better now than I have in years. Can you say the same? Morrison opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time since Victoria had known him, he had no response. That's what I thought. Now get out. He left, his lawyers trailing behind. Victoria watched him go, then turned back to her event. Marcus caught her eye from across the room, raised his glass in a silent toast. Eleanor Ashford, who'd arrived fashionably late, gave her an approving nod. The evening continued. Victoria talked with educators about expanding programs, with donors about new initiatives, with parents about their children's progress. It felt real in a way foundation events never had before. Less performance, more purpose. Near the end of the night, she slipped outside for air. The venue they'd chosen was smaller than the Rosewood Grand, less prestigious. But through the windows, she could see people actually engaged, actually caring about the work instead of just being seen. You pulled it off. Ethan's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him in a suit that didn't quite fit, clearly borrowed, looking uncomfortable but present. You came. Rosa said I had to. Something about not being a coward. He tugged at his collar. I don't belong here. Neither do most of these people, if we're being honest. They just know how to pretend better. Victoria moved closer. But you belong here more than anyone. You're the reason any of this happened. That's a stretch. Is it? You showed me what really mattered. That night at the gala, you saw Lena when no one else could. You didn't try to fix her or change her. You just met her where she was. Victoria felt tears threatening. You taught me to do the same. With her, with myself, with all of it. Ethan looked away, uncomfortable with the emotion. I just did what made sense. Exactly. You did what made sense instead of what looked good. That's the difference. She took his hand. Come inside. There are people I want you to meet. Victoria, I'm a janitor at an elementary school. I don't have anything to offer these people. You have everything to offer. You have experience and perspective and understanding. You have patience and kindness and the courage to be honest when everyone else is performing. She squeezed his hand. Please. Let me show them what real expertise looks like. He let her lead him inside. She introduced him to program directors, to teachers, to the Foundation's new education consultant who was designing neurodivergent-friendly literacy interventions. Some people were clearly surprised by his background. Others saw past it immediately to the knowledge he carried. By the end of the night, 3 different program directors had asked if he'd be willing to consult on making their schools more accommodating for neurodivergent students. Ethan looked overwhelmed but also pleased, agreeing to follow up with each of them. I don't even know what consulting means, he told Victoria as the event wound down. It means they pay you to tell them what you know. Turns out experience raising a neurodivergent child is valuable. She smiled. Who knew? Apparently you did. I'm learning. Slowly, but I'm learning. 3 months later, the Foundation launched a new initiative, the Cole Neurodivergent Support Program, named in honor of both Ethan and his late wife, Sarah, who'd been the first to recognize Micah's needs. The program trained teachers and parents in understanding and accommodating neurodivergent children, with Ethan serving as lead consultant and Victoria providing organizational support. It started small, 5 schools, 20 teachers, a handful of families desperate for help. But word spread. By the end of the first year, they'd expanded to 30 schools across 3 boroughs, helping hundreds of families navigate a system that rarely made space for children like theirs. Lena and Micah became unofficial ambassadors, comfortable enough now to talk about their experiences at program events. They'd perform their string games together, demonstrating the kind of communication that didn't need words to be understood. Parents would watch with tears in their eyes, seeing their own children reflected in these 2 kids who'd found each other against all odds. Victoria and Ethan's relationship evolved slowly, carefully, neither of them rushing toward definitions or labels. They were partners in the work, friends who understood each other's struggles, 2 people learning to be honest about their messy, complicated lives. Sometimes it was hard. Ethan's salary from consulting helped but didn't erase the economic gap between them. Victoria's world of foundation galas and donor dinners still felt foreign to him. They argued about money, about priorities, about how to balance their respective responsibilities. But they didn't run from the hard conversations, didn't hide behind politeness or pretend everything was fine when it wasn't. They'd learned, through painful experience, that honesty mattered more than comfort. One evening in late spring, nearly a year after that first disastrous gala, they sat in Victoria's brownstone, Ethan's first time visiting her home. The kids were upstairs, ostensibly doing homework but probably working on their story. The adults sat in the living room, wine glasses in hand, comfortable silence settling between them. I've been thinking, Ethan said finally, about what comes next. Next with what? All of it. The program, the foundation, us. He set down his glass. This past year has been incredible. You've built something that's actually helping people. But it's also been exhausting for both of us. We're constantly running, constantly fighting. And I wonder if maybe we need to think bigger. Bigger how? What if we made this national, the Neurodivergent Support Program? What if instead of just helping families in New York, we trained people across the country to do what we're doing? He leaned forward, energy building. We could create a network, share resources, build a community, make it so no parent has to feel alone the way we both did. Victoria felt her pulse quicken. That's ambitious. You told me once you didn't do things halfway. That was before I learned that halfway might be sustainable. But you don't actually believe that. He smiled. I've watched you, Victoria. You're not built for sustainable. You're built for transformation. She wanted to argue. Should probably argue. Taking the program national meant more work, more risk, more chances for failure. It meant exposing themselves to even more scrutiny, more criticism. It also meant helping thousands of families instead of hundreds. meant building something that could outlast both of them, that could change how the entire country thought about neurodivergence and accommodation. We'd need funding, she said slowly. Real funding, not just grassroots donations. So we find it. We've done it before. We'd need infrastructure, staff, a completely different organizational model. Then we build it. Victoria looked at him, this man who'd stepped into her crisis with nothing but patience and understanding, who'd taught her to value truth over appearance, who'd become her partner in ways she'd never expected. You really think we can do this? I think we can try. And if we fail, at least we'll fail doing something that matters. He reached for her hand. What do you say? She thought about Lena upstairs, happier now than she'd been in years because she finally had a friend who understood her. About Micah, coming out of his shell through their program, learning that being different wasn't the same as being wrong. About all the other children out there, struggling in systems designed for someone they'd never be. About David, who'd started this journey with one kid and a belief that everyone deserved a chance to succeed. Okay, Victoria said. Let's do it. Let's build something impossible. Ethan grinned. There's that terrifying look again. They spent the rest of the evening planning, sketching out ideas and possibilities, building castles in the air that might, with enough work and luck and determination, become real. Upstairs, Lena appeared in the doorway. Mom? Micah and I finished our story. Want to hear it? Absolutely. The kids performed their tale of time-traveling dinosaurs, complete with sound effects and dramatic gestures. It was ridiculous and wonderful and completely them. Victoria watched her daughter shine, no longer hiding or apologizing for who she was, and felt something settle in her chest. This was what she'd been fighting for all along. Not perfect outcomes or flawless execution, but the space for people to be honestly, messily, beautifully themselves. After the story, after Ethan and Micah left with promises to continue planning, after Lena was tucked into bed, still talking about their next adventure, Victoria stood in David's study. She'd finally packed up most of his things, donated the clothes, organized the papers, but she'd kept his favorite coffee mug, the one that still sat by the window. We did it, she said quietly to the empty room, to the ghost of the man who'd believed in her when no one else did. We built something that matters, something that would make you proud. The room offered no response, but Victoria didn't need one. She knew, in the way you know true things, that David would have loved everything about this messy, complicated, perfectly imperfect life she'd built from the ruins of his death. She turned off the light and headed upstairs, already thinking about tomorrow, about the work ahead, the families they'd help, the systems they'd challenge, about the future she'd stopped trying to control and started learning to trust. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever was. But she had Lena, she had Ethan, she had a mission that mattered and people who believed in it. She had everything she needed, and this time, finally, that was enough.